In the lifespan of most every woodworking shop out there, there are certain tools that you're going to acquire and use. The one we're going to talk about today is the router. We're going to do everything for the beginner from the beginning on routing. So before we get too far into how the router actually works, you have to understand what its purpose is. The whole idea with a router is to take the 90-degree edge on a board and change that profile. Here's an example of one of the bits that we use, and here's the result of it. I used it on this board to cut this radius and this profile on here, so I have a round over here and I have a little lip over here, all cut with one router bit. Same thing with this one down here. There's a nice radius on there, all cut with a router bit. So that's what it does in terms of end result. Now let's get into how it actually works and what it really can do for us. Here on my bench, I've got a router. So the whole idea with a router is to change the profile. If we start out, again, like we just mentioned, with a 90-degree edge here, and we want to change that into some other profile, a router is generally the way to go in doing that. And all a router is a little electric motor with a collet that holds a bit in place. Let's unwrap this real quick so we can show you the anatomy of it. We always wrap our cord around it nice and tight, and if you leave a rubber band on the end of your cord, you can tie it on there so your cord will stay in place when you put it into storage. So I always do that. Let's take this off of here, unravel our cord, and we'll unlock the gate here, and that allows us to take our plate off. So what we've got here is just an electric motor, that's all it is, with this arbor on there that's got what we call a collet on it. So the collet fits down over this, which is the end of our arbor. If we go to a 1/2 inch, our collet sits on here, locks down in there. That locks it in place. And you'll see this one is a 1/2 inch radius or a 1/2 inch shank on it. Some of them come with 1/4 inch shanks. When you're going to buy bits, try to get the ones that have got a 1/2 inch. It's just a little more stable and a little better tool to use. And the way this collet works is pretty simple. The shank goes down into there, and this compresses on it. As you turn it in, it compresses on it and holds it nice and tight and holds it into place. One of the things that's super important is don't have your shank of your bit go beyond the end of your collet. You always want to have that collet right down to the end of it if you can. Reason for that is this receiver is only so deep. And if you run it down in there too far and it sticks out below, if the bit bottoms out on the bottom of the receiver, before the collet gets it nice and tight, it won't pull it down and it won't get it tight. And if your bit is loose when you're running your router, you run the risk of it coming out of your router when you're operating it, and that is a bad thing. So what we want to do here is we want to tighten that up. We're going to take our tool here and drop it on the floor. The good thing is we can hit the floor on the first try every time. I'm going to tighten this up nice and snug. I want to get it over to about here where I can grab both of them at the same time and just give that a good squeeze, and that'll get it nice and tight on there. That locks that into place. Let's talk a little bit more about the anatomy of the router bit itself. Obviously, this is the steel part of the body here, and then it's got this carbide face on it here. Carbide is super, super strong and really retains a good edge and all that, real sharp. The bad side about carbide is it tends to be pretty brittle. So what will happen is sometimes, it'll get dull and all this, but if you ever drop this and it hits the floor, and if you ever see any kind of a chip or a crack or anything develop in this carbide, throw that router bit away. If it impacted it enough to fracture that carbide, how do you know that it hasn't weakened that silver solder weld that's holding that on there? And if that's got a chip in it or a crack on it and you spool this thing up in your router, what happens if that flakes off and comes off of there? I can tell you exactly what happens because it happened to me. I was working on a dovetail jig and I moved my router just wrong enough to where that carbide hit the aluminum on the dovetail jig and it chipped a piece of it off. That chip flew far enough and hard enough to where in my shop I've got sliding glass doors. It went through the sliding glass door. and it was just like a .22 rifle had gone off and shot a hole right through the glass. So it literally poked a hole right into that glass. If I had been standing between that bit and the direction of that chip flying off, it would have gone through me. So do not risk having the face of your router bit come off by having a crack or anything in it. If it's deteriorated, got a chip, got a crack in it, like I said, just throw it away. It's not worth the risk. You've got a bearing here on the end. That bearing is what your board is going to ride on. So if we're in our router here, we're coming across, that bearing is going to ride on that face of the board, and that'll govern the depth of your cut into your piece. We're going to let that sit there and ride along there. When we get it into the router, we'll show you how that works. So that bearing is important. And something else that's important is this keeper on the end here, this little hex screw that's on the end of this. I don't know if I've got the hex key in here. Yeah, there we are. So sometimes you want to check that to make sure that's nice and tight. Make sure that's nice and tight in there. Better done most of the time when you've got it in your hand like this. Snug that up. And again, caution in that if that becomes loose and you're running a piece, that comes out and your bearing comes out, pretty soon now you're not riding on that bearing. It's gone. Your piece is going to dig into your material and it basically ends up ruining your piece. So check that for tight. Make sure that bearing is well lubricated. And again, if it comes to a chip or breaks off of there, pitch it away. If you drop it on a cement floor or something like that, that's what'll do it. Half-inch shaft is good. You've got your shank that'll go into your collet. If you're using quarter-inch shafted bits, you've got a smaller collet that goes in there. Works really good. So the other thing I would caution is when you're working on your project and deciding what profile that you want, you can get a myriad of profiles. Here's just an example. Look at all these different bits in this kit and all the different profiles you can get. You can get 15-degree angles. You can get 22.5-degree angles. You can get all kinds of beads, all kinds of V's in there, round outs, round overs, all kinds of different things. Really, really nice to have that variety. But the thing I'll caution is do not go out and buy a kit like this that's got 1,000,001 different profiles in it, because the chances are pretty good you're not going to use the vast majority of them. I do almost all of my work on stuff just because I like the profile. I like a radius, different size radius bits. Sometimes I'll get into cutting a pattern with a patterning bit that has a straight edge on it. But as you can see, this is a kit that I acquired a couple years ago. I helped a family clean out their garage and their workshop after their dad passed away. And they were generous enough to give me this as kind of a reward for helping them out. There are 66 router bits in here, and 4 of them have ever been used. I've had it for a couple of years, and I've only used like 2 of them out of it. So only buy the bit that you need for the project that you're doing to get the profile that you want, and buy good ones. I've had white side tools. I've had really good luck with the bits from them. I've bought Grizzly bits and had really good bits or good success with their bits and all. So only buy the router bits that you need for the project that you're doing. There's no sense in spending the money it takes to get a kit like this and buy fancy new router bits, because they can be expensive, but they'll last forever. When it comes to sharpening them, there's ways to do that. But ultimately, that's what we've got in terms of the bit selection. Now, how we're going to use this is critical. What we're going to do, and again, we're looking at changing this edge and this profile. Let's get this out of our way. Stash that back over here on our bench. The whole idea, and again, is to change this profile. We're going from 90 degrees here. I want to go down to something that's got about a 1/4-inch radius on it. So we've got that locked into our collet. This is our router plate here. This is what we're going to guide on. This particular one is a real nice Porter cable. It turns to go up and down on there. And what I want to do is I want to set that for about half of that profile initially. I'm going to lock it in place. And this, when we turn it over, this is going to spin clockwise. So we're always going to pull our router into that cut. So we want to go clockwise on it. So we're going to get behind it on the kind of on the downhill side. We're going to pull it into our cut and come around the corner. Let's lock this piece of wood down real quick. Let's grab a bench dog here. And we'll get another one down here. There we go. And now our piece of wood is nice and stable, solidly attached to our bench. We're going to come over here and we'll plug this in, of course, in a second here. And I'm going to grab it here. I like to keep the cord to the off side of the whole thing. When I'm going to go and make this cut that I want to make, I'm going to start with my router off of my piece. The bit is well away from the piece of wood that we're going to cut. You can see there's a margin there. I'm always going to hold the weight of the router with my inbound hand. The side that is over the wood needs to control where the router is. That's what holds my router onto the table. The other one is simply going to pull it along and hold it up. So when I'm going to start it, then I'm going to dive in until that bearing contacts that face surface. That's going to determine how deep our cut's going to be. And I'm going to pull it along that edge with that bearing fully engaged with my face. That'll pull it nice and straight. When I'm done with my cut, I've got both hands down here on my handles, correct? When it comes time to shut this off, I'm going to take my outbound hand up off the router, keeping my inbound hand in place, firmly holding the router in place. I will have moved my router away from the wood, take my hand, go up here and turn my switch off, and then I'm going to leave this hand up here. It stays up here, and I hold it there until that router comes to a complete stop. Reason for that is if I've got my hand here and I'm going back down for this handle here and my router is still running, what happens if I miss that and stick my hand anymore underneath there when that router's running? Don't do that. Take your hand off it, reach up here, turn your switch off, hold your hand here, and hold the router until it stops turning. Oftentimes, I've seen people do this. They'll get the piece done, they'll hit the switch, they'll reach down here, grab it, so they're risking putting their finger under there, and then they'll go like this. Well, if you're going like that, you got a spinning router bit pointing straight at your midsection. You don't want to do that. Leave it in there until it stops. If you're so impatient that you can't wait for it to stop, pick it up and turn it away from you. Always point your bit away from you. Even if it's come to a dead stop, turn it away from you and set it down to where that bit is pointing away. Another helpful hint here is if you want to reduce the friction of your plate on your wood, get out your good old everyday handy dandy crayon, wax that thing up, and it'll slide across your board a whole lot easier. You don't want that resistance in there. The easier that glide, the easier it's going to be for you to operate it. So with that, let's do an example here for you. I'm going to plug this in, grab our extension cord over here. Now, when you're going to plug this in, make sure you're off. Look at your number and make sure it's off. And when you go to plug your router in, always, always, always hold your router in place before you plug it in, like that. That way, if it happens to be turned on and you miss that switch, it's not going to fire up and go dancing across your shop. So always hold it down with your arm while you're plugging it in. That way, it's not going to be accidentally started with the switch on. It's not going to run off on you. So now I'm ready to make my cut here. I've got my inbound hand holding it down nice and tight to the deck. I've got my switch up here. I'm going to reach up, I'm going to switch it on, we'll turn it on. We're just going to run a little short section of it here. And then I'm going to pull it away from the board. I'm going to take my hand off of the handle. I'm going to put it up here and turn it off. Notice again that once I turned it off, I left my hand on top of the router until it comes to a complete stop. I'm going to tip it away and set it down. We've got our bit set real low in our router. We just got a little radius there, probably about 1/8 of an inch is all. A real shallow radius. We're going to reset that bit to make a little deeper cut here and show you how that works. And that makes a good point because actually, if you were to take a bit this size and want that size radius, that's probably 3 passes on your router. You can't take that much material off all in one shot. One, it's hard on the router, it's hard on you, and it's hard on your piece. That much coming off in one shot, you're going to get pieces that are going to flake off and chip off. So you do multiple passes. You set a first shallow pass on it, then you come down and do another one, and you might do a third to get that whole radius on there. So don't be too greedy about how much you're taking off. Be patient and do it in multiple light passes. You'll have a much greater success with your piece. Okay, now we're going to turn the base of our router down a little bit just to get a little deeper cut. Lock that back in place. And that gives us the majority of that bit. So now we're going to cut this again. Held down on our inside again, turn our switch on, pull it down through, and then I'll show you how we're going to shut it off again. Once again, and I can't stress enough, hold your hand up here and let that router come to a complete stop before you set that thing out of your way. And there we have a really nice 1/4 inch radius on our piece. A nice change in profile softens that edge up real good. And with a good sharp bit, it barely needs any sanding. So it's in pretty good shape. Now let me show you another trick with this. That's a nice 1/4 inch radius. If you look at this bit, this is a smaller version of here. It's also got this shoulder here. So if I want a radius and a lip on it, like I did over on that fireplace mantle I've got back in the shop, all I got to do is lower my bit down a little further to get that profile in there. Let me show you how we're going to do that. Just going to roll that down, and I can look at the side of my bit here. I can look at look across the plate here, and I can see that I've got that edge sticking up and that radius on there. So now I'm going to run this on there and show you just a little bit of how the difference that is. And again, just to reiterate, I'm holding my hand up here till it comes to a stop, reach down, grab it, turn it away from you, and now we can look at what we've got for a profile there. We've got a nice radius with a little lip on it. The point is, you can get a couple different profiles out of a single router bit. Works out real nice. Now, technique-wise, if you're going to want to come all the way across and around a corner, we're going to move this over a little bit so we can come around this corner here. What you're always going to do is you're going to, with the blade spinning clockwise like it is, you're always going to want to pull that router into that cut. So you want that blade spinning in and taking it this way. If I were to go the other way, the blade coming in like this is going to grab that wood and it's going to propel that router through the piece. You don't want that. You want to be in control of the cut by drawing it to you all the time. So when it comes to this corner, I'm going to have my bearing on there. I'm going to come up until I feel it come around that corner and simply come down that side. And that's one of those things you just have to develop the feel for it over time. The first time you feel that corner and come around there on your router, it's going to feel a little awkward, but once you get used to it, you're going to feel your right hand here on the inbound side holding it in place and just spin it around that corner with your left hand. You come right around the corner. There, we'll show you how that's going to work. And as you can see, we've got our nice profile all the way around the corner here. Looks out really nice. What I'll always caution is make your initial passes, whatever they are, and then as your last pass to really finish things up, take your router, and don't lower it quite that much, but lower it down just a touch again and go back over it to kind of give it that last polished little finish on there. That's what we got to do. If you try to take too much material off with your router all in one pass, it's kind of like taking too much material off with your mower. If your grass is real tall, you'll cut it in one shot. It's hard on your equipment. It's hard on your yard. With a router, if you're taking too much off, it's hard on your piece. It's hard on your profile. And it can also be real hard on your tool. So again, in the interest of safety, always just take multiple light passes. Here you can see we took multiple light passes here. We lowered the bit down to get a deeper cut. And look at how nice and clean that is. Barely probably needs any sanding. Look what I did on this end over here. I left our bit set as deep as it was on this side and dug into there. And what did I get? A whole bunch of tear out and a whole bunch of fuzz on that edge. And while we're talking about safety, you should be wearing ear protection when you're doing this. Granted, I didn't have it on because I'm trying to listen to the guy that's filming all this for us this morning. These can be obnoxiously loud, so have ear protection on, and obviously always have your eye protection in place when you're working around your shop. just worked with a standard handheld router. Now I'm going to show you this little bit of a specialty router. This is called a trim router. It's just a small version, and I keep this one always loaded with a 1/4-inch radius bit in it. Some people will use it for trimming laminate. They'll put a laminate trimming bit in there. The point of it is, it's just a small little router for doing small work and a specialty thing. And what's more important about this than anything is this little protection plate here on the side. Always, always, always keep that in place, because you're gripping it here. You don't want to run the risk of having that knot there and stick your finger into that bit. So this is the same thing. It's got the bearing on it. It's got the small plate on it. We set it down here. We fire it up. We make our little cut. We hold our router in place until it shuts off. We turn it away and set it down. And right there, we've got a nice little 1/4-inch radius again. Such a little cool thing called a trim router. So we have talked about the handheld router. Where you would use that is where you've got bigger pieces like tabletops, something that is so big that you can't really get it onto a router table. So the size of your piece determines which router you're going to use. So now we've showed you the handheld. I'm going to show you what a router table does now. And a router table is simply taking this handheld, turning it upside down like this, suspending it in a table, and you use the fence and the deck of your router table to help guide your bit. So let's get this out of the way. So, router table. Obviously, we've got a table with a router plate in it. We've got our router mounted underneath on a lift. This happens to be a Jessam lift, which is a great, great lift in a Craig router table. So this gives us the opportunity to run our piece across the table like this and up next to a fence and use the bearing guide. So it's a little more stable. And for smaller pieces, it's a fantastic way to go, a very safe way to go. So we've got our bit already chucked in, and we've got our height of our bit set, so we don't need to worry about that. Now, adjusting the height on your router table is a matter of using the elevator to take it down, take it back up. So different router tables have different elevator setups in them, but this particular one happens to work really, really well. I like it a whole bunch. Now, if I want to use the bearing, I can simply run my piece along my bearing like this. But if I want more stability, I'm going to put my table into place, or the fence rather, into place. So let's get this moved up in there. Cooperation is mandatory. Come on. So I've got a bearing here, and I've got two fence surfaces here. If I want to get all those into the same plane, lock one end down, set a straight edge up on there, and then I push this one back until my bearing engages. And right there, I'm too far. Bring it out a little bit, just where the bearing engages. And now, if I lock that down, the plane that is represented by the fence here and the bearing are all on the same plane.
But wait, on the table saw, the fence has to be like level.
Well, on the table saw, the fence has to be parallel to the blade. With a router table, it does not, because ultimately everything hinges on the center of that bit. So literally, I could turn this like this and run a piece through just as easy. I'm going to get exactly the same result as if I try to make this perfectly parallel. So everything just hinges on the center of the bit. It doesn't matter where the fence is relative to the center of the bit. We got that locked in nice and clean like that. We've got our fence set up. We've got our height set up. Now we're ready to go. Give me 1 second to grab ear protection and push pads to run this through with. We've taken basically our handheld router. We've turned it upside down. So now our blade is cutting in this direction, right? So we're here. It's turning back this way. So our feed direction always has to be this way. We're always feeding from this end, so we're pushing into that cut. And we're always going to be on this side of the bit. Reason for that is if I put it on the other side and I'm pushing this way, the bit spinning here, it would grab it and throw it out the other end of the saw over there. So your feed direction is always important. You're always feeding from the right-hand side through the cutter and always on the outside of the bit. Things that are important in this, in terms of how to safely operate, is where you stand is important. You want to be in a situation such that I'm back here behind the piece, pushing it through. I don't want to be out here doing this And by the way, push pad, you'll notice, always, never ever operate your machine without these push pads on it. It's too easy to get your fingers down in there. These are your guard against that. So always have push pads in hand. I'm going to be standing back here. I want to have my right hand forearm parallel with my fence and pushing in this direction. So that's propelling our piece through the cutter. My left hand is going to be up here, and it's basically pointing down at probably a 45-degree angle into the fence and going that way. So the energy coming into this one is being deflected by the fence and going down this way. So I've got all my energy going in this direction. Obviously, before we start this up, we're going to get our ear protection in place. We're going to have our eyes protected. I'm going to fire this up, drive it through. Notice where my hands are. Then before I do much of anything else, I'm going to make sure that that blade has come to a complete stop before I put my piece back up there and start looking at it. But you'll notice what we've got here is a nice clean cut all the way around that board. Easy thing to do, safe thing to do with that fence in place. So I hope this episode on router basics for the beginner from the beginning helps you out tremendously. We did handheld routers, we did trim routers, we did router tables. One thing about routers, if you get into them too much, they can be addicting and you can have a router problem. What I did to solve my router problem is I put them all on this nice rotating stand. So I got all my bits up here. I got boxes of bits down in here. I've got 7 or 8 routers down here. I got templates on the side, tools on the side, all kind of fun stuff. So there's 1,000,001 things you can do with a router, but be careful, they're addicting.